The following recording originates from Radio Eastern 98.1 FM's fortnightly financial and life planning segment. Welcome to FLP's Financial Life Planning Podcast. In this segment, we'll be sharing with you the story about the richest man in Babylon, Part 1.
For 32 years now, since 1985, we've provided advice and guidance to help our clients meet their financial and life goals. Obviously, we're always looking to add value where we can. We help our clients build wealth and protect it, and we believe we do that fairly well. However, one of the basic lessons that we do see and principles in building and financial security are often lost, and that's particularly with the Gen X's and Gen Y's, which is the sort of, let's call it 34, 35-year-olds and below. All ages can benefit from this story, but while we're accumulating wealth, we've got time on our side to benefit the most, I guess. So the younger you are, the more you can benefit from this philosophy, which we'll demonstrate shortly. So some do it well, but unfortunately most Australians tend not to do the savings type of thing so well. So we believe it should be taught and passed on. So we all need to try a little bit harder. So during this presentation, we ask perhaps some of our older listeners to think about those closest to you, so whether it's children, grandchildren, and in many cases great-grandchildren who can often benefit the most. So in our view, these philosophies should be taught and shared in schools, or at least something similar. Should really start in primary school, ideally.
Should.
Yeah, well, I guess that'd be a terrific lesson to teach the younger brigade, and at that stage, perhaps the lessons learned and put in train stand them in good stead later in life. So it's pretty early to sow that seed at a young age.
And it is a concern that the good old plastic credit card just gets sort of waved around a bit too easily these days, and you don't really have the savings disciplines that we were certainly taught many decades ago. So let us take you back 8,000 years to the ancient city of Babylon. So whether the story itself is a fable or true, it doesn't really matter. It's a good story regardless. So we know that Babylon is an actual location. It wasn't blessed by location. In fact, it was in the middle of Iraq as it's known today. There's no fertile valley. There's no key shipping port. Babylon had to rely on their commerce or business acumen and smarts. So the Babylonians did that very, very well. Indeed, they were largely responsible for inventing currency as we know it today, plus other things such as irrigation and engineering, etc. The king was looking for a way to ensure that his city became the wealthiest in the world, so he sought out the most successful businessman in his city, and a man named Arkad was brought before him. So these lessons were then engraved on clay tablets more than 8,000 or 8 millennia ago, and they're incredibly powerful in their simplicity. And it's amazing to think these lessons are just as relevant today as they were 8,000 years ago. And these are all taken from a great book which also should be handed out in primary school and secondary school, literally called The Richest Man in Babylon. It's written by George Clason way back in 1926. And these are Arkad's lessons. His 7 cures for a lean purse. So we'll jump into lesson number 1. So how do we start the purse fattening, as he called it? So his little philosophy is for every 10 coins we earn, we place just 1 in the purse and take out 9 for use. Spend just 9. So the purse will start to fatten, and at once its increasing weight will feel good in the hand and bring satisfaction to the soul. So to put our twist on that, on the first cure, so we do not dismiss it because of its simplicity. So I guess we were taught way back in the 80s that have people starting to save 10% of what you earn. That's one of the most powerful instruments for building wealth. Ultimately, if you keep aside just 10% of your earnings for growth and income, you put that into income-producing and growth-producing investments. So most self-employed people tend to ignore this basic strategy, so they don't put away the savings because they don't get the super guarantee put away for them.
Which is very difficult. Yeah, that's right. I guess if you're living sort of hand to mouth as a self-employed person, it's always a difficult job to put away anything.
It is, Russ. Our experience has been that self-employed people are of the view that their business will be worth a lot of money and therefore it'll be the superannuation. But unfortunately, the statistics or evidence shows that 80% of self-employed people actually retire with very little superannuation and don't get anything like they would have liked or expected from their life's work being their businesses. So that part of it's quite sad. For those of us that are employed or employed by our own companies, we're still self-employed, but at least we have we're basically forced to put the super guarantee away, which has been around since 1991 now. So today we know it's 9.5%, and by 2026 it'll be up to 12%. So for the younger people today, in their 20s and even in their 30s, their superannuation will be okay. They'll actually have enough to live on more than likely, based on those percentages of their incomes. However, what about outside the superannuation environment for other strategies like debt reduction, lifestyle goals, ambitions, etc.? And a strong focus at Financial Lifestyle Partners is to help our clients build wealth outside the super environment to really live life, along the way and before retirement, and make sure they reach retirement completely debt-free as well. So in practice, I happen to know a 17-year-old that's been working for 39 years now with the initials of Craig Ralph. Must have been in the genes, because way back then I remember walking into a Shepparton superannuation office, MLC it was at the time, and handing over $20 in cash. So they literally accepted your cash on a weekly basis in those days. Not quite sure how long it took before it found its home as where it's supposed to be invested, but having the discipline of saving that $20 a week for that first 12 months, I did ask you this a little while ago, 18 months ago, but how much do you think that would have grown to 39 years later? So we're talking about $1,040 invested 39 years ago at just $20 a week. What do you think that would have grown to?
I've got no idea.
I'd say 100,000.
Oh, pretty close. Oh, well done. Precisely at 12%, it's $86,405. So pretty spectacular. However, if we continue that discipline linked to CPI, which is about $60 a week today, so $20 a week back then is $60 today, just going along at its normal 3 or thereabouts percent. For 39 years, what do you think that $20 then or $60 a week today is now worth?
A lot.
A lot.
A lot.
I think Norm can see a number in front of me.
He's cheating. He's looking over his shoulder. I can't see from here.
Well, 39 years of $20 a week, $60 a week today is $933,825.
That'd be a reasonably comfortable nest egg.
So it's the power of compounding. That doesn't count any other contributions that might have been made along the way, or extra deductible contributions that self-employed people can make, and for that matter, those wage earners, salary sacrifice, etc. That's just the basic savings and power of compounding over a long period of time. We all think at age 17 it'll never happen, but here we are at almost 58, and it's gone in an eye blink. So cure number 2: control our expenditure. So his words were budget the expenses that we can have coins to pay for the necessities, to pay for the enjoyments, and to gratify the worthwhile desires without spending more than the 9/10 of the earnings. So quite simply from that, something we've seen over the last 32 years now is that the income we earn has very little to do with the wealth that we have. We do see people with large hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of income that don't necessarily have too much to their name, so they live for today and yesterday, not for tomorrow. So we know it's important to do the right thing with the income that you receive. It's vital, in fact. So to understand the difference between needs and wants, what Arcad was talking about, the expansion of that cure, control the expenditure, is that we all have wants and desires. So a great example is the young ones today might have a 55-inch colour TV, but they decide they want a 100-inch colour TV, so they just go and buy whether they've got the money or not. So what we're saying is perhaps some of those desires maybe we'll never be able to achieve with larger examples of that, no matter what our wealth. So it's okay to cross them out. It's a novel concept. Say, maybe I should say no to that. Cross them out and don't regret it, more importantly. So just concentrate on what's most important to you. So a big focus for us is not just people's finances, but it's their lifestyle goals and ambitions as well. And they can be achieved without having to spend unnecessarily. So how much do you allocate to savings? How much do you allocate to living expenses? And how much do you allocate to lifestyle? And do we have the right mix? So we also know the danger of credit cards as well. So something we try and coach or teach our clients strongly is that we only should put on the credit cards an amount that can comfortably be paid off from the 9/10 of our income and by the due date. And we also know, Norm and Russ, that some households should destroy their credit cards forever and never use them or see them again. So ARCAD's documented 7 cures for a lean purse. Cure number 3 documented 8,000 years ago. This one's a little bit corny, but simply make the gold multiply. So his words were, put each coin to labouring that it may reproduce its kind as the flocks of the field and help bring to the income a stream of wealth that shall flow constantly into the purse, not just today, but for an ongoing basis. So our version of that once we've started saving at least 1/10 of what we earn, we then must put that money to work. So here's a great example of how we make the gold multiply for our clients. So money growing over the long term. So it assumes we've got a lump sum of $100,000, and it's a little bit hard when we've got a slide, but let's try and visualise $100,000 invested. That's bank interest from 1980 all the way through. So just the compounding effect of that, roughly today, that would be about $1.2 million. So $100,000 left to build and grow, and all the varying bank interest rates, even when it was in the high teens, now down to, you're lucky if you even get a 3% term deposit at the moment. So we'd consider that very lazy money in comparison to some of the other growth investments that are out there. So next, to look at commercial property. So if we think of listed property trusts in this example, so investments inside the property trusts have Westfield shopping centres, big city office blocks. Anyone, Russ, would you like to guess what commercial property would have done over the same period of time, 38 years effectively?
I'm only guessing, but I'd say somewhere around about double.
Yep, that's not too bad. A little bit over $4 million. So we're talking a bit over, about, let's call it 1.2 in cash or term deposits. We're talking a bit over $4 million in commercial property. We know that domestic property actually falls a little bit under that, even though there's been a boom over the last 3, 4, 5 years. Over 37, 38 years, domestic property hasn't quite performed as highly as commercial property, big city office blocks, etc. during that same time frame. Lastly, we have a look at Australian shares. Now we're excluding from this international shares. We're only 2% of the world from a share market perspective here in Australia, but excluding international shares, excluding infrastructure, other alternative investments, etc. We're just focused on Australian shares at the moment, because being Aussies, it's probably what we know the best. So as business people, we know that one of the best ways to build wealth is to run a business, and buying shares is simply the same thing. So you're buying a small portion of a larger business, whether it be the Commonwealth Bank, whether it be a Wesfarmers, whatever it might be. So we put $100,000 in the share market in 1980, and we allowed for the dividends to be reinvested. So typically dividends are paid twice a year, and you use the 4 big banks as an example, and we tend to forget this. We can't even get 3% of term deposit at the moment, but the 4 big banks pay dividends. When you count the tax benefits of owning those shares, or franking credits, the technical term, is better than 6%. It's up around 6.5%, just the dividends alone. So if you just put your bank shares in the back drawer, you've done extremely well. So Russ, this is a bit of a stretch, but what do you think $100,000 in the share market would be worth in 1980?
I'd only be guessing now, so wouldn't have a clue.
It is a bit of a tease. It's almost $10 million. Yeah. So $100,000 over 37 and a half years, that's almost $10 million.
And that takes into account all the rises and falls of the...
I'm looking at the chart here, lots of rises and falls, and we all get a bit too excited when things fall, and we probably get too excited when things rise as well. So it's the greed versus fear which we aim to keep under control.
Very hard to not react to your next door neighbour saying, "Hey, you know."
Well, we're leading to that in the next cure about guarding the treasure from loss. So is it best to take advice from our next door neighbour, our golf buddy, our work buddy, etc.? And the answer is probably not. So we put that money to work and just at the market average. So this is the good, bad and ugly of the share market. It's just the largest 300 stocks or thereabouts, what we call the All Ordinaries Index, which gets reported on TV and radio all around the clock. So $100,000 is worth almost $10 million. Now, again, the power of compounding, we've given a couple of examples, but if your super fund, your investment fund can earn just an extra 3.2% above the average returns, the index returns over a 20-year time frame, so I think 1997 to 2017 only, that actually doubles the outcome. So if your super is going to be worth $500,000, but we or somebody can earn you an extra 3.2%, that 500,000 turns into $1 million. So it's an amazing compounding effect. So I guess that helps highlight the importance of active portfolio management versus the passive portfolio management, or the more index style or industry fund style of returns that are out there. So it's an important part of the big picture. So given the time frame, Russ, we'll probably go through one more, which will be nicely about halfway through the presentation. So a very important one. It's not just about building and growing the investments and portfolio, but how do we then guard our treasures from loss that we build over a long period of time. So Arcad's version of that is consult wise men, secure the advice of those experienced in the profitable handling of gold back in the day. Gold's still very valuable today, of course, too. Haven't
got any gold teeth nowadays. Have been knocked out years ago.
Playing footy, probably.
Yes.
Let the wisdom protect the treasure from unsafe investment. So in this example, even Arcad was tempted all those years ago. So he gave his first years of savings. Remember, he earned his 10 coins a week, spent 9 and put 1 aside in his purse to let it build and grow. He gave that first 52 coins, let's call it, his first year of savings to his well-intentioned brickmaker friend, and brickmaker was a very highly regarded trade back in those days, of course, as it is and can be today. The brickmaker went off to buy rare jewels for him from the Phoenicians. They sold the brickmaker pieces of glass, and Arcad lost all of his savings, pieces of broken glass, basically. So just remember, if it sounds too good to be true, it always is. And probably Bitcoin's a great example of that. We've got a few people put under our nose, what are Bitcoins going to do? And there's no such thing as turning $10,000 into $1 million overnight. It just doesn't happen. So the more we can stop our clients, or anybody for that matter, the general public, making silly decisions, buying that diamond mine in the outback for $10,000 and it's worth $1,000 the next day if we're not careful. It doesn't turn into $1 million overnight. So another great danger we see, Russ, is that well-intentioned advice. So I'd hope our listeners would agree that it's not perhaps the best advice to seek from the brother-in-law, the taxi driver, the hairdresser, the golf mate, the workmate, whatever it might be. Not the ideal people to turn for financial advice. So a recent study has shown through Credit Suisse that only 3% of the do-it-yourself investors, so think of self-managed super funds, only 3% even hit the returns that match the basic market averages or the index returns we're talking about. 97% don't even meet those standard benchmarks. And the reasons why is that emotional and irrational behaviour takes over. So typically they tend to sell low. So imagine Commonwealth Bank, $85 2 months ago and it's $75 today. Well, people, the uneducated, perhaps go, well, let's
get rid of them. Wrong time.
Exactly, and they tend to buy high when they go back up again.
That's right.
If we do nothing else in our role, or people in our industry do nothing else but to stop people from making those emotional and rational decisions, then we'll have done a good job.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Financial Lifestyle Partners podcast. Please note, the information provided in this podcast is of a general nature and does not factor in your personal circumstances. If you require any assistance with your own financial life planning needs, we would welcome you to contact our office on 03 9873 4000.